Hi, it's Kevin Lobates here, and yesterday I was talking about the MVP, so today I thought I would talk about its poorer cousin, the PoC, or proof of concept. Now, proof of concept engineering projects are really, really tempting to engineers because it is basically giving them the license to hack out some code quickly and have some fun without having to worry about any of all the tedious stuff to do with input validation or handling errors or stuff like that. So engineers are always very keen on working on a proof of concept. It's the kind of fun hobby side of development, and that should automatically, as a project manager, set off alarm bells if you're in your head if someone's proposing one. So a POC is a proof of concept, and before you start your company down the path of producing one, you need to ask yourself two very simple questions. The first one is, why am I doing this? Why am I allowing my engineers to code up a proof of concept? And then the second question you have to ask is, how will I know if the proof of concept, once it's produced, has succeeded or not? And if you haven't got clear answers to those two questions, then you definitely shouldn't be wasting your time on producing one. So I can give some examples of valid reasons for producing a POC, and also some examples of cases where it's just not worth it. So the first technical one would be that one of your engineers or you yourself have an idea that you think will improve an existing software system, but you're not 100% sure, so you don't want to throw lots of resource at it. You just want to do a quick test. So that could be something like, hey, I've got an idea for a new blockchain architecture that will work just as well as Bitcoin, but will allow thousands of transactions per second instead of just 5 or 7. And then you quickly code up something to see if your clever innovation works. And if you notice that in your POC you're getting hundreds of transactions a second, that's a success. It's much better than the existing system. On the other hand, if it falls over, you've not wasted too much time. So that's an example of a technical POC. The thing is, most POCs actually have a different audience. They're usually produced in order to impress someone. It could be an investor, it could be a potential partner, it could be a potential acquirer for your company. Say your company has a load of IP and some good ideas, but they don't have market share. Then you can use a POC in order to explain to the executive of a potential buyer why it is that they should be buying you. So if you are doing a POC for a demonstration, then you may actually find that you actually don't need to do any back-end coding, that your POC should be all about presenting the idea. In which case you actually need a front-end developer, or maybe even just a UX guy or a graphic designer, which is not going to make your software engineers very happy. That, you know, they want to be coding away at some back-end functions probably. So there, the answer to why am I doing this is in order to impress, say, an angel investor with the technology that we've come up with, and the measure of success would be that the investor actually invests. And then you can say, well, what would it take in order to be able to convince the investor that we're on the right track? And that may result in a totally different POC to if you allow engineers just to have a go at making it work. And so those are some examples of where a POC is a good idea. Examples of where POCs are not a good idea is if an engineer comes to you and says, I want to code something up, and they can't give you a reason other than, well, I think this tech is really cool and I just want to see if it works. Honestly, I've seen probably about 10 POCs in my time. I've never come across a situation where an engineer said, I think this will work, but I need evidence that it does. And then after a couple of weeks or a month, they've come back and said, well, actually, it looks like it doesn't work. Generally, once you actually start hitting the code face, it turns out that the fundamentals of what you're trying to code up are a lot simpler than initially seemed. So actually that leads on to the third situation where a POC is okay, and that is if you're doing some research. You have some ideas, they're half-baked, you think that you're on the right track, and by coding up a working example, you start scoping out the landscape in the research as to where there are pieces missing out there in the open source world or in the commercial software world, things that don't quite work the way that you expected them to before you started your research. So there's a third case where a PoC is valid, and that is you have a vague idea of something and you need to do some research, and coding up a PoC while you're doing that research can help to clarify your thoughts. So the success measure there is at the end you have your PoC and you have a paper or maybe even a master's or a PhD thesis out of it at the end that shows that the research was actually valid. So that's PoCs for you. I think they're a lot less necessary than the software world seems to believe. I think most cases, when you look at a PoC, you could have just as easily got away with a really well-crafted PowerPoint deck or something put together very, very quickly in a a dynamic web page or something like that. Anyway, that's my take on PoCs. Let me know what you think. Maybe you disagree with me on some of the points I've made there and you think that PoCs are the best thing since sliced bread. In that case, leave a comment below and I guarantee I will respond. That's it for now. See you again tomorrow in the next video, and bye for now.